Hi loves, so here's our body paragraphs mini lesson for research. And you guys have had a lot of experience writing about literature and it's really not that much different. So let's remember just the four essentials of a paragraph. You have transition, topic sentence, specific evidence and analysis, and a brief wrap-up sentence. So remember that our transition sentence, even thinking about it from our outline, leads in from a previous paragraph to assure a smooth reading. It's like a handoff, if you think about it in sense of track, where your relay, it's a relay, so each paragraph is handing off to the next. What we really need to think about with those transitions is what is the relationship between your two ideas. The next one is your topic sentence, which tells the reader what you'll be discussing. And in terms of an argument paper, these are very clear, and they all support your thesis statement. And in your outlines, you've already constructed those, so you know how to do that. And you might have to tweak the wording from your outline, but essentially the topic sentence will stay the same. Number 3 is evidence and explanation, which you know about very well, where you use your support points to support your topic sentence, include quotes and paraphrasing as support for those that develop your claim. It provides a deeper level of detail than your topic sentence. So I want you to think about logos. So if you think back to our use of rhetoric, argument is not an argument paper, an argument research paper doesn't use emotion, it doesn't use pathos, it uses logos. So really think about how you can use authoritative sources and facts and details and historical examples to support and strengthen your argument. The fourth one is a brief wrap-up, or what we call a concluding sentence, that tells the reader how and why this information supports your thesis. It's also known as the warrant, which I really like. The warrant is important to your argument. It connects how you're reasoning and support how you reason your support to fit your thesis, and it shows the information in the paragraph is actually related to your thesis. It helps it defend it. It's not just some random cool story that you found on a website. That everything is warranted, essentially. So some ideas to consider before writing is take out your outline, and you're going to keep those points that you've decided in mind. So number 1, it says reread your point and evidence from the outline for the paragraph you're about to write. Is the point really, really reflective of all the evidence you plan to use? So if you look at your evidence and your sentence doesn't fit, then you might have to switch your sentence. And then you have to think, well, does this even make sense in what I'm arguing? If it doesn't, you might have to change the point or consider adding or removing evidence to make your point clearer. So it's really important to do this step ahead of time. And number 2, decide what should be paraphrased and what should be quoted. We talk a lot about revealing citations. You can pick out only the smallest and most original parts from your sources to include. You don't need to use 3-sentence, 4-sentence quotations from people. You have the ability to paraphrase. You can do it. I know you can. I've seen you do it. So keep in mind which ones do you think are specifically revealing and which ones can just be paraphrased. Also, in that same way, decide how you're going to cite your sources. If there's not anything particularly persuasive or wonderful about the source themselves, if it's a doctor and a PhD in psychology and you're going to use a psychology example, it might be good to introduce that person according to Dr. whomever, X, Y, and Z, and you can get that right from your annotated bibliography. But if it's just maybe like a New York Times writer that doesn't seem to have as much credibility for your paper, then you can just cite the source and include that. And number 4, decide what you want to say and add to the main point so that you can insert your own original ideas before or after the evidence. It's really important that you think about what you want to say about that quotation. Something to consider is take your outline and write next to each one of your quotes what you're going to say about that quotation, because it can't just be a string of quotations plopped in and strung together. It needs to really have your strong voice, not using I or you, but needs to have your strong voice because you're the person arguing and you're just using these other people to help support your point. So here's 10 criteria for writing as you actually start to get into the nitty-gritty of the writing. The first sentence of the paragraph is one of the supporting points from your outline. It can't be something random. That being said, if you realize when you're going through your body paragraphs that you're missing an idea, then you can fix it. Writing a research paper is a fluid process. It's quite lovely. It's kind of organic, and it's not just I write my outline and my paper is perfect. There's going to be a lot of give and take, and that's something that you have to consider. But the first sentence must be a supporting point. It can't just be random. Make sure that the paragraph never strays from the point or the topic sentence. Like I said in the last slide, if you find some cool story, that's great. You can tell it to your friends, but there's no need to try to shove it in a paragraph when it doesn't make sense. So it's really important that all support points, all support quotations, all explanations fit under the same topic sentence for a unified idea. Number 3, the sentences flow well using internal transitions. So we talk about how to transition between paragraphs, but even within paragraphs, we're moving on from first, next, last, and also, and we're moving on to use some of those transitions that we have in our editing packet, where we're talking about in essence, because of, due to, in spite of, and the more sophisticated transitions. Consequently, subsequently, these words that show relationships and don't just say first, next, last, because that's not what an argument is. It's not a process. We're trying to lead them through a logical development of an argument, and you can do that using internal transitions. Number 4, the paragraph contains at least one story or fact or detail or example that illustrates the point. It can't just be you talking. Oh, sorry, guys. It can't just be you talking all the time. Next, the paragraph contains at least 2 pieces of evidence. This is really important. You can't just put one thing in there and call it a day, because that doesn't show that you have strong support. The same reason why you would never try to convince your family to allow you to go on vacation with a friend of yours. You're going to give lots of different evidence, like, I'm going to do my chores for whatever. I'll pay all of this money. My friend's family went for the last 2 years and everything was safe. So you're going to give lots and lots of evidence in any kind of argument. The same thing needs to happen within each paragraph of your research paper. Number 6, the evidence comes from at least 2 different sources. This is really important. That way your research paper doesn't end up just having one paragraph per source, because that doesn't show that you can synthesize your information. It merely shows that you can paraphrase one source or summarize one source, and that's not what research is. Number 7, the sources are cited correctly. There will be another mini lesson for that, but you know how to cite internally: last name, page number. If it's a source without pages, you can use paragraph, P-A-R dot, and do that. So you guys know how to do that, but just make sure that you're citing those correctly as you go along so you don't have to do it later. The sources are cited in a way that helps convince the reader that the point is true. This is number 8. So if you have, like I said in the last slide, a doctor, according to Dr. Kong, professor at Harvard University, that shows the reliability of the source, and it shows that that he or she has some authority. So you might want to include a way to introduce the source. If not, just cite it normally. Number 9, the evidence convinces the reader of the point. This kind of goes back to here, never strays from the point, but also what you choose must be relevant and meaningful to what you're trying to prove. If it doesn't, people won't trust what you're saying and they won't believe you. And then finally, a good rule of thumb is 200 to 250 words in a paragraph. Don't just fill the paragraph with unnecessary words and crazy sentences. You can do it by adding maybe more evidence or more explanation. So one thing to remember is to self-check with our coding method. It works for writing about literature. It works for writing research papers. Do you have a topic sentence? Does it have a controlling idea? Do you have transitions? Are they circled? You could circle them. Do you have main points, evidence, explanation, and do you have a wrap-up sentence? So think of what we've already learned and how that's going to work with us. So here's I'm a Good Writer's example. It is around 200 words. She noticed that she has her topic sentence here: standards-based education, while well-intentioned, has taken over the 21st century, and while the philosophy behind it is practical in theory, in reality there are significant drawbacks. So remember, this is her rough draft, so it's not the perfect sentence, but it definitely shows me that she's going to talk about education is practical in theory. This is her thesis statement. So here she is. According to Herbert Cole, there are two central ideas. Now, she might want to look at who is Herbert Cole and put in her identify piece from her annotated bibliography. So she introduces a quotation: all students can achieve these goals, and students must be given enough time to master these goals. Now, she may not need to use that as a sentence, so in her fixing it up, she can just paraphrase it maybe. But she includes that source, so that's good. Cole, that's one source. I see another Cole, and I see an Eisner, so she has at least a few pieces of evidence, and she also has two different sources, so she's rocking along. She's introduced her sources, she's cited her sources, she's included internal transitions such as in essence and indeed and however. So you can read through, I don't need to read this for you, but you can read through her paragraph and see that she has a nice topic sentence, she has support points. Here she is explaining it in her own words, not just not just reciting the quote, but actually talking about it. Then she moves on to her next point. Here she explains it again. Explains. And then in the last let's look at the last sentence. However, when people move to use units of measure that make it possible to quantify the performance of students and teachers in schools, in other words, turn student success into a test score, they are taking the personalization out in both learning and teaching. So she does have some stuff to work on, but this is a great start for her in her transitions, her topic sentences, her introducing and citing, and her conclusion sentences. So good luck on your quest, and just make sure to remember what we've talked about in this lesson.